Well, good evening and welcome to another in our series of program, Talk Sports, where we speak with the movers and shakers in sports, the sportsmen and sportswomen and administrators as well of past and current. Well, this week our guest is Grenada's boxing legend, Bernard Bonnie Wilson, a former Olympian and among the first to represent Grenada at the Olympic Games. Well, Bunny is expected to join us very soon, but as you know, during the 80s, boxing was among the top competitive sports in Grenada, and a number of boxers have blazed the trail, including the late Trevor Thwaites, also Andre the Giant Stewart, among others, who would have blazed the trail along with Bunny Wilson during the 80s in boxing, when boxing was very competitive. And it used to be, outside of probably track and field and football, used to be the go-to sports, If you're not at the then Tantin complex in particular, or the Carnage Sporting Complex, boxing, then you're missing out on quite a lot. And there was once upon a time that Grenada actually reigned supreme in boxing in the sub-region, the OECS. Remember, Grenada has been the leading boxing nation in the OECS and held its own among some of the top regional contenders like Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Bahamas, and even Barbados in terms of boxing. And in 1984, Grenada's team, particularly to the Olympic Games, particularly made up of boxers. And as soon as Bonnie is with us later on, we'll be speaking to Bonnie about his tenure as a boxer, welterweight, in the 1980s, and especially at the Olympic Games, the other boxers who were with Bonnie, and what has gone wrong with boxing over the years. It has not been the dominant sport it was. And once upon a time, boxing used to be, as I said, the go-to sports. And then from time to time, we would have recognized that, some up-and-coming boxers will be on the field. But as we say, our guest is Bonnie Wilson, a former Olympian and among the first to represent Grenada at the Olympic Games. Well, Bonnie, I believe, is joining us from the comfort of his home in a warm Grenada. And I say, welcome to Mr. Bernard Bonnie Wilson. Good evening to you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, boys. Sorry to be a bit late. The technology was kind of beating me up. So I ended up having to use,
as a former boxer,
use my phone.
As a former boxer, you've been beaten by technology?
I am telling you.
Welcome to be there, Bonnie. But probably, how have you been coping with the pandemic? I know you have been all about the place, but how have you been coping?
Very well, It has not changed my life very much because I have not really been up and about too much anyway, Mm-hmm. So the parties and things like that don't really put me out.
Well,
so I'm okay.
Yeah, well, that's good to know that you and family doing well, and well, that's good to know. Well, Bonnie, let's start off by basically introducing yourself to our viewers, because yes, the name will be synonymous to people who have been following sports, and particularly around the 80s and 90s. But for those who don't know, Bernard Bonnie Wilson, what can you tell probably a young sportsman, sportswoman, or sports enthusiast who is Bonnie Wilson?
Well, I can tell you who Bonnie Wilson was.
Glad to hear that.
Well, you want me to start from back there?
But and including Bonnie, how because Bonnie is synonymous with sports and boxing, but how you got yourself involved in a sport like boxing?
Well, I got involved in boxing in school. I think I just like to fight on the whole.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, I fought as boys, and always never with stones or sticks or anything like that. It was always getting in the pasture and doing judo or having gangs and playing and fighting against each other, but and fighting with friends, not necessarily enemies. So when I got to GVSS, boxing was one of the sports offered. I started boxing. I was pretty good at it. Nobody ever beat me in GVSS. And so I, Coach Grant and Coach Bell came when they heard of me, and they brought some other guys from off the construction sites and things like that. And I beat all the guys from the construction site and, others. I just kind of took it on from there, and then, left school, continued boxing. The revolution came along, and that the revolutionary government was much more interested in sport and in boxing. And so we had much more coaching. We had Cuban coaches. We had a lot of travel. We were able to, imagine in that time we even fought in Las Vegas. So I stuck with it. I was good at it, and I continued on to the Olympics and beyond.
But boxing was your only sport you were basically involved in at that early in those early years?
Nah, I played a little football. I did a little track and field. As a matter of fact, I actually have a bronze medal in the 100 meters in intercall when I ran for St. John's Christian Secondary as a sub-junior. So I did a little of that. I played some badminton, and I played football for a club called Liverpool in St. Paul's in the community competitions. But I've never really excelled as much in any other sport as I did in boxing. But I also didn't pay any other sport as much attention and work as hard in any other sport as I did in boxing. I mean, and I think you asked me at one point, what would I have to tell young ones thinking of being involved in sport? Sport could be a vehicle for a lot of things in your life. If you do it well, you become sufficiently popular. People would know you. You can, there'll be doors that can open for you that might not normally be open. So if you find a sport that you love, you should pay serious attention to it. I'm not saying to sacrifice your academics and things like that. I would never encourage that. But you can find time for sport sufficiently to do it exceedingly well and still excel in your academics.
Oh, well, that's very interesting from you, Bunny, because we have been hearing time and time again how and it's good of you and others who have been encouraging those youngsters how they can balance sports and academics. And what I want to ask you now, how or what it took, Bunny, during those times. You mentioned about the 80s during the revolution and thing, to be a boxer, to be competitive, to train, to have that level of commitment for a sport like boxing. What it took for people like you and others.
Listen, it's a lot of hard work. But the thing about it is when you enjoy what you do, it's not that hard because you enjoy it. So you're prepared to make the sacrifice. But like I used to run 6 miles every morning and still do a few push-ups and sit-ups. Go to work, come from work straight to the gym, and spend another 2 hours in the gym where maybe 6 rounds of boxing and a lot more exercise, cardio and things like that, and even strength training, running up steps and have people on your shoulders running and doing wheelbarrows and all the various exercises, skipping. So you had to be dedicated to the sport. You don't expect to get out of it what you don't put in. And I used to try to train as harder than everybody else and compete with the bigger guys as much as possible. So there were times when I would beat up on fellas like Trevor and McCarthy in the gym, and you swear we same weight category. But that's the kind of thing that was necessary in order to compete. And I mean, when we went out to compete, like in Cuba and such places, because of where we're from and our limited exposure, you might find some of us with 10 or 12 international fights at the time. And some of those international fights include fighting against people from St. Lucia and St. Vincent and things like that. And you go to Cuba and you find that a lot of these guys have 200 fights, 250 fights. And if you allow that to psych you, you're in trouble before you start.
Yeah, but you know, and you mentioned some names like the late Trevor Thwaites and McCarthy George and others. I mean, Bunny, you'll agree that quality fighters in those days.
Yes. We did well. We really represented Grenada. I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet here, but it's true that we really made Grenada proud in those days in boxing. And wherever we went to box, we commanded some measure of respect. I can remember we boxed in Cuba, and even the fights that we didn't win, we looked like we knew what we were about, you know. And well, in the OECS, we were tops from the very beginning until we left boxing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you know, when you talk boxing and you don't mention the name Bonnie Wilson, is that you just probably saying B. Yeah, you know, it's not saying you know, it's not boxer, not boxing. You know, it's just B, and you know, you're missing something. But Bunny, and you touch a bit on it. Even prior to going to the Olympics, which we'll talk about later on, as you indicated, you know, Grenada ranked among not just ranked, but was the top boxing nation in the OECS during those years. Right. And even, and I indicated, held its own among some of the powerhouses, the Caribbean powerhouses, Jamaica, you know, Trinidad, Bahamas, Barbados.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that, and then we'll probably even talk about what has gone wrong, Bunny. But, you know, Grenada, you know, was the leading nation, boxing nation, I should say, in the OECS.
Well, we were tops in the OECS because we had better coaches. We were very much assisted by the Cuban coaches. We got a chance to go to Cuba on 2 occasions to train for competitions. And we had exposure from traveling throughout the region and as far as places like Las Vegas, Venezuela, and things like that. The other people in the other boxers within the OECS did not get that much exposure. We also had more local competitions. And there's nothing to sharpen the skills of a boxer better than consistent, good competition. It also gives you an idea of exactly where you are. And so you have an idea of what you really need to do to get further. And so we won like sometimes 7 and 8 out of 12 divisions, and even more in the region. I mean, our heavyweights made the other heavyweights look pretty small. And like Trevor and McCarthy and so on, the guys just used to look at these guys and want to change their mind, but they reached too far already to do so.
Yeah.
So within the OECS, we were the big guns because we were by far more exposed and better trained.
You have me cracking there with this because and how it was, Bunny, in those days to get involved in boxing without the pressure of parents, saying, because there were those who were fearful that boxing was a brutal sport. Well, it's still considered to be a brutal sport. So
Yeah.
in those days, I mean, how would you able to convince your parents, for example, that boxing is your love?
Well, in my case, my I was kind of the head of my house. So if I told my mother I wanted to box, if even though she might not have been happy about it, um, she would leave it up to me and hope that I know what I'm talking about. Other guys, a lot of the guys who were involved in boxing, I think their parents just were happy to know that they were staying out of trouble. And some of them, their parents might not have mind seeing them come home get kind of beat up because they couldn't beat them themselves. So
there goes money. So the parents took boxing as a means of, to some extent, outside punishment then.
yes, yeah, and because of the prestige of boxing at the time and the opportunities to travel and things like that, parents were more inclined. But then again, a lot of the folks who really got involved in boxing were teenagers, late teens, early 20s, and beyond. So they were at an age and stage where the parents would not have had or not have worried too much, about them being involved.
Okay, I don't want to get lost in some of the comments that come in there, but enough love, my brother, sorry, on the giant malt bottle. Best wishes to you, brother. Mr. Grant was a dad, trainer, motivator, and more. Thank you very much for your national service. I'm still proud of all of you. James Haynes, Pancho, Sandy, Colin, help me. Some interesting names, but let's talk about the giant malt bottle first.
Well, I did an advertisement for Giant Malt a lot of years ago.
Yeah, well, that had to be a lot of years, because when you talk about Giant Malt, yeah.
Yes, that was about 1985.
That was since before Vitamalt.
Long before Vitamalt.
Right.
And as he said about Coach Grant, do you know Coach Grant is about 90 and still coaching, man?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. We need to some names mentioned there, and we do need to talk a little more about that. But definitely, as he says, was Grant, who he considered as a dad, a trainer, a motivator, and more. And you talking about Coach Grant, who would have coached you back in the 80s.
Yeah. Coach Grant is the guy I went to the Olympics with. And boy, Coach Grant was so very enthusiastic all the way, every time. I mean, just say be, not even box. And he's, we still need dedicated guys like Coach Grant to take up the mantle. Because, I have not gone into coaching or anything yet, because believe you me, I couldn't sacrifice the time necessary. But I'm coming up to retirement, and I'm definitely going to get involved in retirement.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Some of the comments still coming in. Hey, Greg. That's Greg. Greg is over in Australia. He works. Wow. He works with the Grenada Olympic team. He's a physio. He has been doing a great job with the national representative, not just the Olympic Games, but also Commonwealth. And Greg has been very good to a number of our athletes, the Kirani, the Aline Francis. I mean, just name those athletes Greg would have worked with over the years. And then Matt Phillip is saying, how about the towel wave? I know you would have experienced the towel wave from Coach Grant over the years.
I think one time he got a prize for that, I mean, everywhere people used to be very excited about seeing the towel wave, to the extent that sometimes he stole the show. They didn't even bother with the boxers. They were waiting on the end of the room for Grant to wave the towel.
Yeah, and it served as some sort of motivation to the boxers as well.
I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Donna Joseph is saying, True Bunny, in your days, along with McCarthy George and Trevor, during the 80s, Grenadians, we were proud whenever there was a match. Everyone would be awaiting the results, bated breath, though. Grenada was the top of the top in the OECS in boxing. And you're talking about, if you're waiting on the results, it had to be that you went all the rounds and not a knockout. Yeah? So you're waiting on
Right.
whether
Right.
it's split decision or whatever.
Well, none of my fights ever went the distance in OECS. I knocked out everyone I fought against in the OECS competitions. And a lot of the other guys won in similar fashion. But yeah, some of them did end up having to be a decision. In the OECS, we were good. We were really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Bunny, you mentioned about boxing, not just in the OECS and even at the Olympic Games, but you also we had boxers. I don't know if you were part of that would have gone to Fort Bragg, and Fort Bragg came to Grenada, and we boxed against the top boxers from the U.S. Army.
Yeah, I was the only one who won in Fort Bragg, and I lost on points here. A couple of the other guys lost on points. But there were two good competitions. I mean, even the guys who lost, a lot of them looked the part. It's not like we were totally outmatched by the folks from Fort Bragg. I was the only one who won a bout when we had the return match in Fort Bragg.
Okay, let's move over to 1984. Flag bearer, representing Grenada, and you were among the first set of Grenadians who participated in the Olympic Games. We'll come back in a moment. Just let's look at that.
Bare feet, and everybody's wondering whether she's going to run on her bare feet in the Olympics or not. Grenada.
It was only last Tuesday, really, that the Grenadians found out that they could come to these games because some people or a group of people, unidentified, sent them enough money, $23,000, for them to come and participate in these games. Grenada, followed by Guatemala, the largest country in Central America. We'll be back in just a moment.
Yes, the late Peter Jennings recapping the Grenada's participation in the Olympic Games in 1984. Bernard Wilson carrying the flag.
I didn't even know that somebody sent us $23,000.
Well, that's how Grenada was able to participate. Somebody sent $23,000 for Grenada to participate. But well, and it was a proud moment for not just for you but for Grenada, because and I guess as much the efforts of John Diabo, who I also noticed in the parade there. John Diabo and others. But again, boxers dominated the Grenada team 1984. Let's talk about that, Bunny, as a flag bearer. Well, flag bearer and as captain of the Grenada team. So it was a first for you for a lot of reasons. The first flag bearer, among the first to participate in the Olympic Games for Grenada, among the first as an Olympian for Grenada. So let's talk about the experience, Bunny.
Well, I was also among the first to get past the first round of competition.
Well, I was leaving it for you to complete among the first. Tell us all the first then, buddy.
Well, let me tell you, it was a very exciting time. I mean, the Olympics is about the highest height you could get as far as amateur sport is concerned. We are out in Los Angeles where everything is big and done in a big way. And at sometimes it might even have been a bit overwhelming. But we all buckled down and we gave it our best shot. We worked hard, we trained hard while we were there. And we got to know that we were going pretty late because it was a touch and go situation. As a matter of fact, we only got good boxing shoes when we got there and had to work them out and train them to become accustomed to them because we couldn't go into the ring looking as we were when we got there. and we got Adidas to give us some pretty good looking shoes. Well, the accommodation was great, and we had to watch what we eat because there's a lot of food that we're not accustomed to in a big way, and so we had to be, on our P's and Q's, and we I think we managed well. We adapted to the situation, and I think we did. We managed well.
Mm-hmm. What's about you? I think you had your first bout was a Nigerian.
Yeah, he was ranking number 4 in the world before the competition. I think he won the first and second round out of 3 rounds. I was holding my own, but I was more defensive than anything else. You see, in a game like the Olympics, when the boys before me lost in the first round, everybody, I'm the captain and I want to do the best, so I just want to make 2 rounds instead of 1. But after making 2 rounds, Coach Grant said to me, Bunny, you're down by the first 2 rounds. If you don't knock out that guy, you can't win. So I used some of my Cuban training in that I just jumped straight out of my corner when the bell rang. And I met the guy still in his corner. And he was absolutely shocked at what was happening. I caught him a good left and then a right, and he dropped. And he was groggy and couldn't make the 8 count, and I won the bout. But it was just, I don't know where the guts and the everything came from. But after doing 2 rounds, I knew I did better than everybody on my team. And so I thought, well, let's do or die. And that's how I got to win the fight.
Okay. Before we go on and continue with the discussion of the Olympics, your good friend Toro Depredine, with all due respect to Bunny and Trevor and all the others, the greatest boxing contest in Grenada was at the Tanty Netball Courts. Fingers versus his American opponent.
Fingers.
I know. Toro will go for the drama and the excitement and the humor. But Buddy, what's about the other boxers? I mean, name some of the other boxers who were part of the '84 Olympics.
Well, it was Christopher Collin, Trevor Twaits, Emerald Phillip, Tad Joseph. There was one boxer from the US, from Canada, I think.
Yes, I think I gave you his name some time ago. We'll get back to it, but the rest of the Grenada team.
I think it's Hayden Hayes too.
Oh, we had Hayden. Okay.
Yeah. So we had the largest contingent. I think we had 6 or 7 boxers.
And what would you say coming out of the '84 Olympic Games, and specifically for boxing, what boxing would have gained out of that for Grenada?
Well, boxing got a great boost because of the fact that we went to the Olympics, that somebody made it through past the first round. And a lot of guys became more interested in boxing. But boxing had a fairly steady decline after the fall of the revolution because governments paid less attention to boxing. And so travel became more difficult. Sponsorships were not as powerful. And so this is why we kind of are where we are today. There is the international rows and scuffles right now in boxing, but even locally, I think the association needs to revamp itself. think it was sometime last year, there was supposed to be an election. I'm part of the association, or a member. Went to the election, and there was some row over the eligibility of some or one of the candidates to run in the election, and that broke up the election. So there was no election. There was one consoling thing for me out of all of that, is that it's interesting that folks are still fighting to be part of the executive, because I'm in another executive, and I can tell you sometimes you have to fight to get people to be involved. So there is hope for boxing where that is concerned. We still have a very good ring. Stephen Benjamin came back from the US and started a good thing in River Road.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some very good boxers in that gym also. And so I think that when it all comes around, when the COVID and things like that have been controlled to some extent, we could see an upsurge in boxing. We could see a good association being formed again. And I am looking forward to more boxing and better boxing in the future. One good thing about the previous association, or the outgoing association, is that they insisted on having people train in the various areas of the discipline. So they have a lot of referees trained. They have coaches who are trained, internationally trained, and so on. So yeah, boxing can, and I think it will, take off again in the near future when we are in a position to really box as we should.
Yeah, but don't you think with all these uncertainties with the administration of boxing in Grenada, it's affecting the development? Yes, you mentioned the interest, and obviously I know Stephen Benjamin with his enthusiasm in River Road, and then the late Andre, the Giant Stewart, was also involved.
Yeah, man, he invested a lot.
Yeah, he invested quite a lot in it and things like that. So, and then with and then we must point at Shane Joseph, and then Sebastian Steele in Carriacou as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of the administration of boxing, and we've seen what has, and you mentioned it, what has been happening internationally with all this scandal regarding AIBA and World Boxing Association and different groups tugging and fighting the Russians, etc. And then there is a lack of organized competition in the Caribbean, and what is happening now locally, and they're referring to Grenada, somehow it's affecting the organized boxing in Grenada.
Yes, but if we can get sufficient people interested in boxing, local competitions go a long way. And from these local competitions, despite all that's happening, and Guyana still has a very vibrant boxing association. I'm looking forward to possibly going to Cuba to box. And Trinidad has been trying to keep something going. And so despite the fact that the OECS, well, St. Lucia have something, but despite the fact that the OECS is not as it used to be when Reds Pereira and so on were involved, there is still hope in the region.
Yeah, but in the meantime, there is this demise because
there is. But the COVID situation has extended the demise, in that if you know you get something going now, guys are not really supposed to be out boxing. Boxing is a contact sport.
Yeah, we do, and a very close contact sport too.
Very close contact. I mean, contact enough to knock you down. And so that also has put a damper on things.
Yeah, but
I
even
look forward, huh? Go
yeah,
ahead.
I was saying prior to COVID, there was a level of frustration even among boxers themselves. I've spoken to one or two boxers who were a bit frustrated, and that's prior to COVID.
But yeah, but that is when the elections were supposed to take place.
Okay.
And a new association would have been vibrant and healthy and reviving the whole sport. So that has been placed on pause. But I think that when the new association comes around, they would have a whole new drive, new impetus.
Yeah,
And I expect, because Stephen is there waiting and ready to go. He has all the facilities. We'll be looking for some place now to house the gym because the River Road folks needed the community center. But I firmly believe, because I look at the boxers and there's still a lot of enthusiastic folks waiting to be involved. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom. Call me an optimist.
Okay. Sebastian is saying the problem with boxing in Grenada is administration. It's time for a change of the guards. Okay. That's Sebastian Steele, and I'm certain that he's speaking from a well-informed position.
I agree with him also. And I think that the new association, if even though it's a composition of old ones and new ones, if I'm to judge from the level of enthusiasm showed in the aborted elections, I can't see folks having that much desire to serve, not doing what they should be doing when they get there. And there are quite a few people capable of serving who were getting involved.
And you're saying that the elections were aborted on an issue of technicality.
Yes.
Well, since boxing,
yeah,
I know there's
a technical
yeah, but in the interest of the development of sport, I don't understand why some sort of technicality and is there a pending litigation regarding?
No.
Okay.
No. I think one of the folks running for president resigned from the previous council because they were not happy with the way things were going. They thought that there wasn't enough being done. Then that said person decided to run for president, and there seemed to have been a clause in the Constitution which stipulated how much time he was supposed to serve on the council before being eligible to run for president. And apparently, not enough time was served by the said person. And the whole idea was questioned. And there was sufficient of a division in the meeting to bring about enough confusion to abort the whole show.
And boxing would have made tremendous strides over the years, especially with the involvement of women at administration and technical as well. And referee judges, for example, we even have female boxers, but it was impressive in that so many women were involved in the running of boxing in Grenada over the past few years. What has gone wrong, Bonnie? Don't you think that this delay in getting an association functioning is also hampering the development of sport even among the females?
Yes, but what has happened is that the elections were supposed to take place in March, I think it is, right? And at the same time, COVID came around and we were on lockdown and the elections did not take place. Not enough of the folks have the technical capability, the electronics, necessary to have an election, a virtual election, or whatever it's called. And so I think because even the Olympic Association was asked to get involved, they did. And I think with their input, things were put in place so that a proper election can take place and so on. But now that there's a COVID situation on, basically all such sports are in some form of flux, some state of flux. You're not going to find very much happening when people are not able to practice and compete. And so right now, it's like you're on the starting line waiting for the gun to go. Right? And this is why I'm saying, despite what it seems like now, we're not dead and in the coffin. We might be in the coffin, but we're just resting.
Well, hopefully our administrators are not using COVID as an excuse to, delay something as critical as a new mandate in terms of.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Fair
I firmly believe that when things get going, the administrators will come together and have a proper election and move on from there.
Okay, let's get some comments again. Toro is saying boxing globally has been on a decline. Years ago, the average man or woman on the street was able to name the top boxers in the world in all weight categories, especially heavyweight. Today, there are few quality world boxers and they are barely known. You agree?
Yeah. I agree that apart from everything else, there is so much more in the line of sports on television, on everywhere, that the pie has been sliced thinner. There's the UFC that's quite exciting, but I still don't think many people know the names or can remember the names of the guys in the UFC. I can't even suggest what should happen for boxing to become more popular. It's just one of these things in life. You have cycles. You go up, you go down, sometimes you go out. And I think we are in a kind of down cycle right now, which means I always say when you reach the bottom, it's one of two things: you go out or you go up. And I think we might be coming close to the bottom, which means it's up here and go after that.
All right. Toro is responding to Michael St. John. Mickey, same with me. One boxer will come along now and again, say Roy Jones, and he could hardly find a worthy opponent. He beats up everybody and wins every match. No competition. You think what Toro is saying there has some merit, especially with the likes of Mike Tyson and others, even though exhibition, trying to revive boxing?
Well, I thought Toro knew more about boxing than he's exhibiting.
Buddy, that was a low punch.
Purposely. That's for the fun of it. Well, no, what you find is that there's always someone more popular in any sport. And the people who excel are the ones who would hit the limelight. But you have 8 to 12 divisions in boxing, and each one has a champion. And so what we see sometimes are the ones who excel in 1 or 2 divisions, right? So somebody in the welterweight division is looking spectacular and beating up everybody and suddenly becomes more attractive. Somebody in the heavyweight division is beating up everybody and suddenly they become more attractive. And there's nothing wrong with that, because everybody likes a winner and everybody likes to see one person win for a time, and then they want to see somebody beat them. It's not that exciting when every time you turn, there's a new person at the helm. There's nobody then for you to want to see get beaten, or nobody really you want to see win. So there's nothing wrong with that. I would think that is part of the attraction or the allure of any of these sports. And I mean, quite often is the same in things like tennis. where number one is number one for sometimes 2, 3 years, and then they just lose a slight edge, because anybody who's involved in sport at the top level knows that is a slight edge between first and second and third year. Sometimes it's just the willpower. And the day you're not too hot at it, somebody else takes your place. So, yes, but that was always the case. When it was, what's his name? Roy Jones. Roy Jones was the hottest thing since sliced bread. When it was Sugar Ray Leonard, when it was Muhammad Ali, and from way, way back. But that's one of the attractions of this thing. Somebody really doing well, and others trying to pick him off the top. So that's not anything new to boxing.
Okay. Before we continue with our discussion there, let's just go back to the Olympics. The boxers, Chris Collins in the middleweight, Emerald Phillip lightweight, Anthony Longdon, I think that's the name you're trying to get.
Canadian, yeah.
The light heavyweight, and then we had Bernard Wilson in the welterweight. And you referee in yourself and Emerald received a first round bye. And then Emerald lost to the fighter from Zambia.
Yeah.
And you defeated the Nigerian.
Yeah.
And then you went on to the quarterfinals where you lost to Sweden, right?
Yeah.
And you lost in the third round. And both Christopher Collins and Anthony Longdon, they lost in the first round. Collins lost to Samoa, and Anthony Longdon lost to an Iraqi boxer, Salman. So you were the only one who basically advanced
to
the third round, which got you into the quarterfinals. And if you had won, you would have been into semifinals and at least a medal.
Which is medal, yeah.
Yeah, so you were just one.
That's close.
Yeah, very close. One from getting into the medal round.
Yeah.
And I think that is where some people at the time believed that when they heard that Bunny won, that they thought Bunny won a medal. Yeah. I didn't understand that it was a long way to go. Bunny, let's continue the discussion, and it has to do with equipment, boxing equipment, and it's something that would have affected, it had affected boxing for quite a while. Where, as you know, for many years, the same ring that the boxers used to train was the same ring they used for competition. So that, for example, at the Carnage Court, you will have the boxing ring up in the gym upstairs.
Well, no, we didn't have a boxing ring in Carnage Court.
Yeah, but
that ring was too big for the Carnage Court and too heavy. Mm-hmm. We only use that ring in competition.
Yeah.
So we just run a piece of rope across the thing there and practiced in that.
That you mean upstairs, right? On the top floor.
Upstairs, right. Yes. Yeah. Now when we go down to compete on the ground, on the plane, on the tennis court or the basketball court.
Netball.
Then we put up the ring there, or we go across the canteen. Mm-hmm. But that was also part of our problem, because we did not have a ring to practice in. Whenever we got into a ring, it was new. So it's when we went to Cuba to train that we trained in rings daily. Or if we got to a competition site early, we could go and get a few rounds in a ring to sharpen your ring awareness and skills. And so we were always at a significant disadvantage, to the extent that it's amazing that we were able to hold our own in some of these competitions against guys with a whole lot more fights and a whole lot more ring experience. But we did. Mm-hmm.
Buddy, you think at your age you can still spar? Do you? You think you can still spar?
Boy, me, I don't only think so. I could knock down a lot of people still, and I'm not one of those people with the kind of whatever syndrome it is that you think that you can still do. I remain fit. I remain in shape to a fair extent. Um, I have my little stuff here that I do, and I can still knock down a guy or two. I
Okay.
know that.
Well, here is one for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Fight on, Toro.
Yeah.
Fight on, Toro.
That's unfair because Toro has never been involved in boxing. So for him to fight.
Yeah.
No, I mean I can still do a little something. As far as fitness is concerned, I'm still fairly fit.
Mhm,
Not necessarily fit enough
mhm,
to box
mhm.
3 or 4 rounds, but I could get up to that shape if you know.
Have you
If I had to.
considered? Have you considered coaching?
But yeah, when I'm finished with work, I'm 58 and a half. So I have a year and a half before I can retire.
Mhm.
And as soon as I retire, one of the things I do is seriously get into coaching boxing.
Bonnie, you said that you know, the message you want to convey to the young ones that sports, and in this case, in your regard, boxing, through boxing, and your involvement in boxing slash sports, you were able to live a comfortable life. And it's a message you want to convey to the young ones that there is the possibility, there are opportunities, and even though the opportunities then in your time were limited to what we have now, you were still comfortable enough that you were able to come out of sports and live in a comfortable life.
Yeah, I'm easy. I'm comfortable. It's not the same for all of the people involved. Um, but sport could be a vehicle for upward mobility in that if you do well in it, if you're sufficiently recognized, you can get your foot into many doors. It's up to you to earn a seat at the table. And so, in my case, when I applied after leaving school, I was well known so that when I had to do an interview, the people who were interviewing me knew me to the extent that some didn't even call me Mr. Wilson as they would formally do. Some called me Bunny. And so getting a job was not difficult at all. I worked only 2 places in my life, Huggins and Guardian General. And when I went to Guardian General to get a job, I was very well known by the folks there to the extent that we chat about boxing and a few other things. And they asked me when I could start the job. So I think boxing also sometimes, or not boxing, but sport on the whole, can help to give you the kind of confidence necessary to meet people and talk and sell yourself and, the exposure. So I would definitely recommend that every young person should find a sport that they like and pursue it. Give it your best shot. Do not forsake your academics for it, but that is never necessary. And what it does too is it gives you an idea of how to manage your time. Time management is important in school and at work. And so if you can manage your schoolwork, your academics, and your sport, it augurs well for you in the future, managing work and sport, work and family, and things like that. So, some parents have it in their head, boy, study your schoolwork, forget it. That's a whole load of nonsense. That's a whole load of nonsense. That's a very primitive idea. And so that's my daughter calling the mother. Yes. So that's a primitive idea. And so you don't need to forsake one for the other. They
Okay,
can work.
they can. Okay. We have been speaking all along, but you haven't described how you got the name Bunny. I mean, it's Bernard Wilson, but Bunny?
Yeah. Now some people even call me Bernie. But Bernie is shortened for Bernard. I actually got my name because I was born at Easter. And when I was born, I looked like a rabbit. That kind of little pink thing with big ears and gray eyes. And so one of my aunts commented that I looked like a rabbit, and they called me Bunny. Another one went home and told my grandmother, who's my mother's mother, well, surely you have a little child, but he looks so ugly. And so when my grandmother came to the hospital, she said, that's the little thing, but he ain't so ugly after all. And my mother nearly killed everybody for that. Who says she child ugly? I mean, they see how the ugly duckling turn out. I mean, so that's how the name Bunny came about.
Okay. And you earlier in the program, you briefly mentioned about your involvement in all the sports. And are you referring to as president of the Tennis Association? Are you still the president? And
Yeah.
how have you been able to manage that involvement in boxing and general life?
I've not been more involved very much in boxing. I was helping Stephen with the River Rogin. But my main thing was really involved in tennis. It's not going badly, but as with all the other sports, because we were unable to have competitions, not very much is happening, but we're starting back slowly. We have a few items on for November and December with the juniors. We up to yesterday we repaired all the lights. We had to repair about 7 of them. It cost about $4,000, and so the infrastructure is in place. But the COVID situation, we're getting back slowly.
Well, it's good to hear that, and if we can just a little comment still on the tennis, because I know that on during normal times, tennis will be played almost throughout the year, and then we have the schools involved now, and not just the schools in St. George's, but the schools all over playing tennis, and particularly driven by a committed soul in Richie Hughes.
Yeah. Richie is still there, still committed. He's assisted by Selma Phillip and Giselle Clark. And they were doing pretty well until COVID. But even, Richie started back a few months ago, and you can't really, according to ITF rules, you're not even supposed to have train too many players at one time so that they're too close. And so because we were deemed to be COVID-free up to recently, we were taking a chance with coaching a few kids. But none of them, Richie or anybody else, is up to any real speed at the time. But they're all ready to go too, I mean, as soon as things get back to some measure of normalcy, or as soon as the abnormal become normal, we'll be ready to roll.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bunny, I know it has been a sort of uncomfortable situation for you in terms of the technical,
Really.
you know, how you were able to cope technically. But
Well, it was a nail biting finish start.
right. But nice having you and nice getting to know a little about your involvement, and hopefully you made that commitment that probably in the next 2.5 years, possibly, God forbid, that you may probably get a little more involved in boxing, directly involved in boxing, and probably to some extent some coaching as well. I think you're looking at you eyeing retirement, eh?
Yeah, man. I'm sure in the next 6 to 8 years we could get a few boxers to the Olympics.
Okay, and boxing hasn't had the opportunity in recent years of getting well, when I say recent years, I'm talking about Olympic Games, of actual qualification. I think usually they go to the qualifying tournaments, and then if you qualify, then you go. But in some cases, Grenada were able to get boxers to the tournament, to the Olympic Games, sorry, by way of I think allotments or
Special
something like
entry.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, special
special entry.
allotments. I think. Right, and then
Yeah.
you have you have things like the Commonwealth Games and others that you don't necessarily have to have qualifications to
But
to
if you get a
participate
bronze, if you get a bronze in any of these top games, you automatically qualify for the Olympics.
for the Olympic
So
Games. Okay,
if you get a bronze in Commonwealth Games, or bronze in Pan Am Games, a bronze in the Central American and Caribbean Championship, you automatically qualify for the Olympics.
okay,
Right? And
and
I'm looking forward to people being able to qualify either that way or through the qualifying competitions.
okay. Finally, on the final point, we mentioned briefly Coach Norbert Grant. What you think should be some level of recognition, and I'm not talking about a Queen's Medal or something like that sort.
Well, he
But
does have, I think
and I'm saying, that's just cosmetic to an extent. But in terms of, something for, well, for Mr. I almost say Sir Norbert Grant, but for his tremendous commitment to the development of boxing in Grenada, and to an extent in the sub-region, because when you have other tournaments, and Mr. Grant is around, sometimes he lends his expertise to the
oh yes,
boxers
oh
from the
yes.
other islands.
I mean, one of the things that could have been done is some form of pension, a pension sufficient to make sure that modest housing can be achieved, a pension enough to make sure that your basic needs could be properly met. Would not be asking too much for contributions such as Coach Grant and the other coaches who would have contributed in a similar fashion. Too often, or old folks who contribute so much and give so much of their time are rewarded only by a little memory here or there by the people whom they excited along the way, which does not put anything on their tables. And I think we should get past that kind of situation and find it within our system to make sure that such people are at least comfortable in their retirement for all that they've done. Because these people were very instrumental in forming our nation. When they take care of the young ones who go on to do well in various areas, Because some of these guys whom Coach Grant took care of might not have gone on to be world champions, but they're going to be good citizens involved in their skills, and because of their training and discipline, become good plumbers, good electricians,
Mhm.
good carpenters, good teachers, and some physiotherapists and things like that. So after contributing to that level and also gaining recognition for the country, they should not be relegated to some part of the back of the woods where every now and then somebody, but that man was a good man and he did that. So that's not enough. So I think a decent pension, if it comes down to it too, and if it's possible, modest housing, so that all of these folks in their old retirement can at least reap some reward apart from the fact that they contributed to the lives of so many.
Well said. And just to add that Mr. Grant, as a coach, um, and he basically, for some people, they thought that Mr. Grant was a full-time boxing coach, but coaching boxing was just part-time because he was a tradesman. Okay,
Mr. Grant worked with the telephone company. He was a linesman.
linesman. Yeah, yeah.
And he retired at normal retirement age. I think it's maybe 60, or he stayed on for a little while longer.
Mhm.
But Mr. Grant is a phenomenal dude. I mean, at 90, he would still put up pads and have fellas boxing and hitting pads and things like that. If at 90 I could do that, I'm
Mhm.
telling you, that's fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Bunny. And
Thanks for having me, Mike. My pleasure.
yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, then.
All the
So,
best, bro.
all the best. Okay, so Bunny Wilson, boxing legend from Grenada, represented Grenada at the 1984 Olympic Games. He was a flag bearer, and he was among Grenada's first Olympians. He was one of 4 boxers who represented Grenada at the 1984 Olympic Games, along with Jacinta Bartholomew in the women's long jump, and then you have Samuel Sani in the men's 800 meters at the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Well, thank you for viewing, folks. And don't forget to join us this weekend for the Saturday Sports Special from 1 p.m. with our special guest, George Gotti Robinson, the former track and field administrator. He will be with us as we continue with these speaking with our sportsmen, sportswomen, administrators, past and current. So until then, stay positive, test negative.